To speak about Sri Aurobindo and his writings is quite a task. We have more than 36 volumes of his collective works, and many of his writings were not included into these 36 volumes. There are thousands of letters written to his disciples on different topics, and especially on the topics of integral yoga. There is more than 6,000 letters were written to one person, Dilip Kumar Roy, his close friend, who was seeking the blessings of Sri Krishna and didn't even notice that Krishna was part of Sri Aurobindo in that yoga. So if you look at all his works, so we will see how rich it is, starting from his early writings in the beginning of the 20th century. From 1900s he started to write his poems, his sonnets, his cultural writings. Then he was engaged in Bande Mataram topics, many articles, and Karma Yogin. And actively he started his yoga from 1908, where he maintained his records on yoga. It was his diary for his progress in yoga. And then there are many different essays, divine and human, essays in philosophy and yoga, and these are voluminous works. There is a huge number of letters on yoga. There are 4 volumes collected from different letters he wrote to different disciples into 4 volumes. There is a huge new volume which came up, which is called the Vedic and Philological Studies, which were only part of his archives. It's an invaluable writing, especially for those who study the Vedas. And there are also Secret of the Veda, which was called On the Veda that time. So all these writings were written mainly in the period of 1940, 1920, and many of them were then edited in the later time, in the 30s and 40s. The Secret of the Veda, the Isha Upanishad. It was first, the Isha Upanishad was the beginning of the Life Divine, and then it became a separate writing. The Kena and other Upanishads, the essays on the Gita, the Renaissance in India, which we know as the foundations of Indian culture. Of course, his magnum opus, Life Divine, the biggest writing of more than 1,000 pages on the philosophy of integral yoga. The Synthesis of Yoga, the most extensive psychological look at yoga, synthesizing different paths into the integral path. Here he follows the Gita, the Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and he adds one more yoga, the yoga of self-perfection. And there are also his writings on the social studies, such as the human cycle, the ideal of human unity, the war and self-determination. These are most important writings in the social and historic studies. That time it was called the psychology of social development. It's quite interesting. Later it started to be called the human cycle. There are also other works, such as on future poetry. Aurobindo himself wrote 7 different dramas in the most beautiful English poetry. And of course his profound and major work, Savitri, which is the biggest poem written in English language and the most luminous. There are more than 20,000 verses in this poem. There are many more things which were written by him, but they did not constitute the part of the collective works. It can be found here and there, different articles, different messages to India's independence, 5 dreams, and so on. So, the interesting part of this was then when he was writing for Arya, this was the journal started by him and the mother. When mother arrived in 1914, she actually encouraged him to write these writings, and herself she had to go to France and then to Japan because of the First World War. So she was absent for quite some time, till 1920. So within this period, from 1940 to 1920, he was writing his chapter by chapter, all the major works in the periodical journal called Arya. And the interesting part of it is that he was writing simultaneously several chapters from several books. So he wrote the chapter of Life Divine, then the chapter on the synthesis of yoga, the chapter of the human cycle. So in this way he was writing simultaneously several books in a parallel way. It was a discipline which he followed, of the automatic writing or the inspirational connection, which was coming to him. The text was coming to him in a perfect form. So many times he was cognizing the meaning while it was already expressed. And in this way, of course, all these texts are perfect in every way, in the clarity of thought, in the depth of meaning, in perfect English language. So this is what I wanted to convey about his writings.